Good morning and welcome to Your Retirement Playbook. I am your host, Joe Clark. So happy to have you along. Hey, we're not going back in a time capsule, but I do want to remind you where this show came from. I get asked a lot about, where people's strengths are and weaknesses are. I'm one of those people who really believe that people need to play to their strengths, not to try to improve their weaknesses. And as much as I believe that, throughout my business career, throughout my sports time and career, we still have to have some basics that are covered. There are 5 areas that I believe can destroy a person's financial plan if they're not all covered. We trademarked a process called the family focus process. I think with all things, you have to first start with a financial vision. You have to understand where it is you want to go. And many times I see people come in with, I want to have $2 million in an account, or I want to have an average return of 10%, or I want to pay the IRS, nothing. Or I want to leave behind $1 million to my family, or I want to spend it all and hand the last check to the mortician, and hopefully it bounces. There are a lot of different goals and objectives, but to not know what that financial vision is, where you start, I believe literally leads to a problem. And then that gets us into 5 areas. And I had one of my families that I've taken care of for over 28 years now. Looked at me the other day. I said something about not being attentive to details. Details are not my favorite things. That's why we have 37 people that are on our team. I've got CFAs and CPA and a chartered market technician, people who love details. I'm not. And he looks at my detailed board of all of the things that we're considering. And I said, hey, I take care of 250 engineers. Of course, I have detailed processes that are put together. It's just not my preference to get into the details. There are areas that I like more than others. I love to teach. I love to learn, and I'm incredibly coachable. Those are my strong suits. Things that I'm not good at, I've been able to hire around and to try to get into the right direction. Well, and the reason I present this to you is those 5 critical elements. First, you have to start with a vision. You have to know where you're going. But those 5 areas that I think can fundamentally destroy a financial plan. So think about being a C student for a second in these areas. Your life after work is how you're going to live after you separate from the workforce. Your annual tax plan, and it does need to be annual. You have to think of your tax return as a one-hit wonder. The third is the investment playbook. What do you deal with, or how do you measure success in a volatile, crazy economic world that we live in, with news broadcast across the board and lots of uncertainty, quite frankly. Fourth is life happens. Those are things that are just going to occur in your life. Quite frankly, before I started doing the show, I got an email that I wish I hadn't have opened before I started. Life comes quickly. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's usually surprising. The interesting part is it's not probable that it would happen today, but it is quite likely that when you know as many people as I do, or you do the things that I do, you're going to get bad emails from people having health crises and challenges. But last but not least is the legacy plan. And those are really challenges that we all have to endure. And what I have found is people will come into our office and they're really good at one of those areas. They're like an A student. You're your superpower. You've identified it. You're good at it. You may really understand the investing, so you don't need a financial planner. Or you're really good at understanding how the retirement concept works, of what income is versus assets, and the differentiation between the two. And I think it's very, very easy to get caught up into this process of where we're so good at one, we ignore the others. Because when I see people who are truly successful in life, they really were A students that had some C's, that focused more on making their A's A pluses than their C's up to B's. The problem is in financial planning, any one of those 5 areas that I laid out can really devastate a financial plan. They can really derail you. And so, like I have done at the Financial Enhancement Group with our team of 37 or 38 people that we have right now, I have gone in and added people for the areas that are not my strong suits. You'll hear people talk about a team concept in financial planning a lot. where they have 2 or 3 people that you may see or may talk to. In all fairness, in our industry, that's one way to transfer a set of clients to a new generation. That's not what we do. We truly believe in a team collaboration in terms of where we are. And remember the difference between cooperation and collaboration. Cooperation is I say, please do this, and they do it. Collaboration is, I need to have this done. What do you think's the best way to do it? We do that a lot with CPAs and tax planning attorneys for the legacy planning and things of that nature. So I bring this up because I'm taking you back to my time at Purdue, where I started teaching in 2008, at Purdue University, and I taught the senior level or the capstone course of financial planning. And it honestly, other than the Great Recession of 08 and 09, it was some of the best years of my life. I met some of the neatest people I still communicate with on LinkedIn and every now and then Facebook. 5 of them actually work for the FEG team. So it's been great to have them along with us. But one very interesting week, we had a snowstorm, and I couldn't make it to Lafayette, Indiana safely. I called the students and said, hey, y'all stay home. I'm going to do the radio show this weekend for you, and I'll give you a test over it next week. And, we did that. We had more responses from you guys, the people listening to the show, from that teaching episode than we ever did from anything that I had done before. And so I'm going to kind of go back in my roots today. We're going to talk about a case, if you will. It's a case that's real, that's come in right now, that just kind of shows you some of the typical complexities that we deal with at FEG. I'm going to try to take it from what I would call a 100-level course. So these are simply the basics. And then we're going to go through the progression, if you will, all the way up to a senior level course of where they are. Now, I want to remind you, you can find all of this on our podcast at Your Retirement Playbook. That's the full show. If you just go to YouTube, Your Retirement Playbook, you can find it. There are also 6 individual shows that are out there for people who want to focus just on particular areas. There's the tax planning show, Your Life After Work, the legacy planning show, the investment playbook, the Better Giver show. We believe you should be an efficient giver, not necessarily a bigger. We just want to make the most out of what we have. And the life planning show. That's the good, bad, and ugly of life. Those are the 5 critical elements plus charitable gifting. They go into those 6 different individual shows. So you can just watch tax planning after tax planning if you so desire. Your Retirement Playbook is what it's all about. It really is, how do you enjoy your life after work? So the case we're going to deal with today is a couple that are 55 years old. They have 3 kids with 3 grandkids. And let's not kid ourselves, the grandkids are the most important part of this equation. They had $1.85 million that they had saved and accumulated January 1st of 2022. The division, this is important, but we'll come back to, is how it is owned. We'll come back to that because that's not 100 level. They're in good health. I think people talk about that. I think some people have the conversation, are you going to move or not move? And I will tell you, you can tell me all day long you're going to not move, and I will believe you unless, of course, you have grandkids who live somewhere else. And then, in all fairness, I'm not sure you know what to believe to be true. Their AGI is $175,000. They're a nurse and they're office administrators. And they're concerned with what they hear about on the news. Inflation, volatility, and legacy. How do you take care of those 3 grandkids? Because we know the kids, their children, are inept and are not going to provide for their grandkids the way that grandma and grandpa think ought to be done. Very, very, very common things to hear about. Now, let's break this down a little bit before we get into 200 level. They're 55 years old. What does that tell us? Well, from a tax planning side, that tells us there's some opportunities out of 401ks, possibly, probably, but that do not exist inside of IRAs. You can take money out of a 401k, providing the plan document allows for it, sooner than an IRA. So we're getting past that 10% federal penalty of taking money out early, very, very likely, since both of them are working and we have 2 401ks. They have 3 kids. Just remember, and we'll get into this in the legacy planning, not all beneficiaries are equal. They're not equal. All assets are not equal. Remember I told you they had 1.85 million and they're worried about inflation and they're worried about volatility, partially because they hear that on the nightly news, but the other part of that is that's what comes on the statements. They look at the statements and they go, oof, right? When was the last time they made $200,000? Because on paper, that's what they've lost this year. The account values are now 1.65 million. Now, this is not 100 level. This is where you get into the tax diversification. And it's why at the Financial Enhancement Group, when you get a statement from us and you try to focus on the $1.85 million number or the $1.65 million number, I'll say, how is it going to be taxed? Because not all beneficiaries are equal, neither are all assets equal. In this case, they have 50% in a Roth or in a 401k between the two plans, 30% in a Roth, 20% is taxable. They're in good health. Most people say they're in good health. Sometimes they really are, sometimes they're not. AGI was 175, but if that's all they answered and you didn't find out that 20,000 of that was actually overtime, that's a very, very important question. How long have they been getting the overtime? Is it expected to go forward? What does that mean for their tax side? So their nurse, office administration, nurses are in need of by great abundance right now. We have none that are out there. They would be hiring them all day long. Office administration could depend on the type of business that they're in. But pay attention to the longevity, the lifespan of what that occupation is and that employer might be. We're going to lay these out for you a little bit more complex. We'll move it up each step, but we're going to hit inflation, volatility, and legacy. Do not forget to go to YouTube, wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Your Retirement Playbook is the full show. You got the tax planning show, Your Life After Work, the legacy planning show, investment playbook, the Better Giver, and the life planning show. We'll be right back.